right, guys, Monday. Welcome to the channel. This is going to be awesome. It's Metagame Monday. We have some legacy tournaments to dig into. I've chosen to go with the 4 weekend challenges alongside the qualifier on Friday. And that brings us to a total of 40 decks. So you know the drill. Last week, we introduced the blue painter deck as a major new player in the metagame. And the deck did even better this week. So I want to talk a little bit about why this deck is good. So painter, the painter aspect of the deck is actually, not the main thing. The main thing is that we now have Emery, Tamiyo, and Stock Up as kind of card advantage sources. They even synergize with our artifacts. We also play Thoughtcast. We can support Force of Will. We're an Ursa Saga Ancient Tomb deck. And then randomly, we do have a combo up our sleeve. So this deck checks so many boxes. You don't know if you need your, mass artifact removal, your needle, your wasteland, your spot removal, your forces. You don't really know what you're going to need in any given game. And this deck can just, if you have a slow hand with a lot of counters, this deck can outdraw you. If you wasteland them a few times, then maybe Emery Recurring Bauble will make them recover. Turn 1 Tamiyo has to get killed a lot of the time. This deck is just super well-rounded. So usually this kind of deck will be something like the Mystic Forge deck, maybe like 6 months ago, where it's easily shut down, cannot play Force of Will, stuff like that. But this deck is so well-rounded, and we need to address it. So that's what I'm going to try and do in the end with the sideboard section. 9 copies out of the 40 decks. Incredible showing, incredible week, and we need to address this deck. Next up is the Eldrazi deck. 6 copies all across the top 8s. Very solid. Also, just quick note, Painter disrupts the Eldrazi deck, making them not colorless Eldrazi. So there's even something there between the Ancient Tomb decks. But yeah, Eldrazi keeps putting up numbers. Eldrazi is preying on especially the slower blue mid-range decks. As you can see, the Tamiyo pile is way smaller this week, and I suspect it has something to do with its struggles against Eldrazi and Painter. Yeah, Eldrazi is a deck that, if we want to beat it, we can. It's something it has been a deck for a while, so we kind of know what tools are needed, more consigns, more harbingers, faster clock, preying on the Ancient Tomb, getting tapped over and over, stuff like that. Next up, we have 5 copies of Reanimator. So this deck is still putting up good numbers, but it's not, going totally crazy. It looks like between people playing, Kozilek's Command over here, Nile Spellbomb over here, Ursa Saga and a combo finish over here with a Soul Guide Lantern, this deck is kept in check. Still a very good deck. People are still playing the same Plan B, the Barrogoyfs, the Murktides, the Brazen Borrower for, Swiss Army Knife. And Reanimator is just a very good deck. Nothing problematic in my book. Nothing. It's just good. And it does see a lot of play, mainly because of its reputation and power level, of course. So yeah, don't go to your next tournament without Graveyard Hate. Tamiyo, as an archetype at least, one might be the Nethergoyf version, one might be like Baleful Strix. But they're all days decks, so like the bigger Delver decks, let's call them that. Did not have a good week compared to last week. Still solid, right? But I think this is very classic when the policeman of the format, the reactive deck. You need to play the right numbers. Let's say you play a lot of, Hydroblast or Force and Negation, and maybe you lose to the 3 top decks here. So you need to adjust a little bit. And that's pretty normal when there's shifts in the metagame. So I expect this deck to come back stronger with a more well-rounded 75. And in the meantime, I guess, don't be weak to Orcish Bowmasters. That's kind of the thing about this deck, is that if you play into Orcish Bowmasters with small creatures, etc., draw poorly timed draw spells, you will get punished. This next column has been a reoccurring theme. Couple of Oops All Spells decks. Looks like people are now playing enough, Gauges and Leylines to keep that deck somewhat down. Only a couple of Moon decks. I'm actually surprised about that. Because you really want to play against Eldrazi, but I guess the basic lands out of the Tamiyo decks is kind of annoying. So same thing with the the troll decks, the Reanimator decks, sorry. So we have a big chunk of Dimir decks here with good mana bases. And then I guess we will have to wait and see what kind of mana base the mono blue painter deck settles on. For now, they do have Sagas, they do have Seed of the Synod, so I like Mono Red Prison into this field. A couple of Vile decks, the Death and Taxes decks have been good solutions to handling the blue fair deck and handling the graveyard, but I think now with the mono blue painter deck in the mix, it's going to be harder to make your, let's see, 95, yeah, your 95, be sufficient against the field. That's kind of been the problem always with these non-blue fair decks, that if we both have to worry about dying turn 1 and we have to worry about weird stuff in a longer game, it gets hard. But if we only have to address, you know, the Daze decks and a certain kind of combo, we can be fine. A couple of actual teamer decks makes it into these top 8s. I like that a lot. Lightning Bolt is killing everything out of the painter deck. Pyroblast is just very strong against that deck, so happy to see somewhat of a comeback out of that deck. The one-off pile here, single sneak attack deck, no stock up. Single Dreadnought deck, like that a lot. Maybe the Dreadnought deck got to, you know, play main deck Consigns, play main deck Doorkeeper Thralls, and get some value here. Fast Necro combo deck. Classic lands, always tip my hat when I see that deck doing well. Doomsday out of an expert, a Dredge out of a dedicated player. Bigger mid-range Esper here with Stoneforge, so that deck would be ahead against something like the Temur Delver decks, the Tamiyo decks, and then it's kind of up to you to sideboard your way out of Graveyard and Eldrazi. So not exactly a perfect positioning for that deck. So it looks like Newton did have some impact, a little bit of Cradle Control, seeing play in one of the top 8s, and then 4-color Beanstalk as well. So out of this pile, I'm not too worried. So I think right now we can group them into Daze decks, Graveyard decks, Ancient Tomb. Look at this, Ancient Tomb decks. Then we have some fair decks over here that's actually trying to solve this riddle rather than be a major player. So I think we should look at it like this and go Ancient Tomb, Graveyard, Daze. And when we're picking our deck, we need to make sure that we are doing well against all of them. So number of Graveyard Hate is relevant. Good mana base, basics, relevant against Wasteland, relevant against Blood Moon, well, relevant against Daze. And we need a bunch of spot removal, and maybe we also need a deck that can capitalize on our opponent tapping Ancient Tomb over and over. So with that being said, I've now covered the top 8s, and yeah, let's have a look at what I have prepared over here. So I really want to make this clear. We need to address this deck. Collector Oof, Null Rod, Stony Silence are basically the same card. If you have green tutors, we go Oof. Null Rod is castable out of any deck. Stony Silence is very specific. If you have a lot of white mana, you can play this card. But otherwise, you should just play Null Rod. And then there's the thing that if you also play like a split of Meltdown in your Stony Silence deck, then it's better than Null Rod, right? But yeah, these will shut down the Baubles, the Seed of the Synods, the Moxo Bolts, Petals, all sorts of trinkets, Grindstone itself. Very awesome cards. Pyroblast, as I already alluded to, is awesome because the deck is a force deck. The deck is a, you know, Emery, Tamiyo stock up deck, so Pyroblast is amazing against it. Consign is not perfect against the deck. It only counters small stuff, and Painter itself still fine. Good crossover, and it's obviously insane against Eldrazi, so I like it a lot. We have some mass artifact removal here. So your opponent is a Seed of the Synod Moxo deck. Sometimes they have even Saga tokens, right? So Meltdown is awesome. Seed of Innocence is a bit of an odd one, and destroy everything late in the game. No questions asked for 3 mana. I will say it does not kill the Saga itself, which is, you know, worth thinking about. Force of Vigor, I guess, if your deck is tapping out heavily and your green count is solid, you can consider this card. Entity Flux, not sure when that will ever fit in. Should be devastating against them, though. But also something they can actually beat between, you know, Emery and playing out from their hand, comboing off, milling you out. So maybe that's not the best. And then to round out the possibilities here, Wrath of the Sky. So let's say you're a control mage. This card is actually awesome. It also takes care of the onboard Saga. compared to Meltdown, so the timing on the Wrath of the Skies can be a bit better. But of course, also the number of decks that can realistically run the card is going to be somewhat lower. Yeah, I think that more or less brings us to the end of this video. So to recap here, Ancient Tomb crushing, almost putting up half of the top 8s here, plus 40% is a lot. So yeah, I mean, it's not a bad time to be attacking our opponent's life total. It's not a bad time to be wastelanding. It's not a bad time to be pyroblasting. So I am very interested in Temur Delver into the current metagame of Graveyard. The Days Mirrors are not ideal because the Bowmaster deck does go bigger than you. But in order to beat this pack over here, and then you can always compensate with Graveyard Hate, I really like it. And of course, when you look at these matchups, Sneak, Necro, Doomsday, so some Force Negation matchups, Price of Progress matchup here out of the Exploration deck, lands, of course. You can leave home with enough Dreadnought removal to not be super soft. This is going to be tough. The Vile deck, Death and Taxes is awesome. Beanstalk is going to be tough. White is going to be tough. Stoneblade is going to be tough. And, you know, Dredge is kind of a graveyard deck. So, I don't know. Nothing's perfect. But Temur Delver is probably going to be my pick for this week's tournament if I manage to find some time to grind. And, yeah, let me guys know what your weapon of choice is, how to deal with the Painter deck. If you're even a Painter player, I would love some insight on how the deck plays. The deck looks very, very consistent and also can, you know, can take some punches. I think it looks like something that mulligans a little bit poorly, but then again, if you just have Ursa Saga, Ancient Tomb, uncontested, you can just, you know, beat whatever is in your way. I think that's the biggest strength of the deck, that you don't, as an opponent, you don't really know what end of the deck they're drawing. And sometimes you can't have it all. You can't have, you know, spot removal, wasteland, clock, force of will. Like, that's just not feasible. So you have to hope for the best when playing against this deck. So yeah, that's going to do it for today's episode. I hope you guys enjoyed it and it was useful, like you have let me know that it usually is. And yeah, I hope to see you back soon on the channel. Bye, guys.